to The Relationship Edge, a podcast where we explore the power of relationships in the private markets. I'm Ablorde Ashigbi, the CEO of 4Degrees and your host, and I'm joined today by Andrew Romans, a general partner and founder of 7BC Venture Capital. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Ablorde, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, super excited for our conversation today. I'll start here, which is you're a prolific author. You've got 4 books and counting on the space in general, whether it's specifically on raising venture capital or on specific technologies like blockchains. What drives you to write and publish so much?
Yeah, great question. And by the way, I think at least 2 of my books have real sections talking about relationship development and networking and a lot of specific tactics on how to do that to be successful with a startup, venture fund, anything in the ecosystem. So I think it's cool that you've got this podcast so focused on, what's one of the most important things. And also one of the, not everything is within your control in this world, like you create a startup and then Google offers it for free. Now, what are you going to do? Where, investing in your relationships is, a key part of the meaning of life and a key to success. So that's cool. To answer your question, when I was running the Founders Club, which was a venture capital equity exchange fund, founders were swapping a little bit of their privately held stock in that one company that's venture backed with 24 other startups. And then when we talk about relationship, once we do that, we all go out to dinner. Everybody introduces themselves. I've already distributed packets and I say, all right, you are all now shareholders of everybody else's company. You're basically an investor. Help them, obviously. If nothing else, help them, introduce them to their next Pritzker VC or whoever to fund the next funding round, right? So when I did that, we ended up with so many portfolio companies. They were always coming into my office in Silicon Valley saying, hey, should I sell the company or should I raise another round? Or how do I get rid of this founder or the founder's quitting on me? What can I do? And I was always telling stories of what somebody else did to get through the same thing. And back then, things were a little less PC. I was kind of humorous, cracking jokes a bit all the time. And people were like, dude, you should write a book. And I was getting it multiple times per day of, you should write a book, you should write a book. Because I'm just shooting out bullets of what somebody else did in a similar situation and what you can do to get through this, ugly situation you're probably in. Or, beautiful choice. Should I sell for $1 billion or should I raise 500 million at a 2 billion valuation, whatever. So I decided that first book was like a baby that had to come out. And then the book was too long. So the book was had to be 50,000 words for McGraw-Hill, and it was like 500,000 words. So I thought there's probably like 5-6 books here. And the easy thing to cut was get rid of Europe, get rid of international. And I thought I would write books. I was kind of enjoying it. And then I cut corporate venture capital, like Intel Capital, Microsoft Ventures, Salesforce Ventures, all that kind of stuff, which is a very different animal. And very complicated, although a huge opportunity. And that was book 2, And then fundraising to me is one of the most important things for success. And it's something that I consider myself very good at. And, our portfolio companies have one of the highest graduation rates in the industry. I think a lot of VCs literally, they know everybody. They got this relationship thing in place. They fund the company like Santa Claus. Hey, here you go, money. You do the work. Hey, here you go, money. You do the work. And so I thought fundraising is just so damn important that I would even literally save myself time to just write the book and be like, there it is. Here's a free copy. Here's that chapter. Like, on my superhuman, I'm just like spitting out, pre-written content. And a shorter answer on all this is that look, there was a time that if you wanted to be a prolific VC, you were blogging like sometimes every day. You had Fred Wilson, New York. You had, Brad Felt in Boulder. You had Nick Brisbourne in London. And then kind of the iPod came out and Apple launched this podcast thing. And so you had Harry Stebbins in London. You had Jason Calacanis with This Week in Startups, from the Launch Festival thing. That, kind of podcasting is sort of taken over a bit. And, some cultures read less than others. And the United States is definitely got TikTok brain. And so in some ways, books are only for the French and the Swedes at this point. So you got to get on podcasts. And even that's too much. Now you got to give them a 30-second short.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely people's content consumption patterns have changed, no doubt. Although I'm definitely still a book reader, and I know plenty of folks who still pass along certain books and treat them like Bibles on certain topics. And I
Yeah.
imagine that the books that you've written, particularly in some of those domains, are canon. And so definitely understand the value of taking all of that knowledge that's in your head and kind of ensconcing it in one place.
Well, that's the thing, and I just want to say on that too that like I remember a very long time ago, and I knew Mark Andreessen before he released Mosaic, which became Netscape, and
Mm,
I remember looking at Mark Andreessen's Twitter profile, and it said something like, I don't know, 87,000 tweets to date, and this was in the early days of Twitter, and I said to myself, all right, so how many seconds per tweet is that? And I'm like, dude, you could write a book in far less time, and you could go deep and in depth and fully debate, convertible notes, why, history, what do they get for, pre-money, post-money safes, why, what do they get for, what's illegal, QSBS, and let someone walk out as a master. Or you could give the 140 character puddle deep shallow. It's like being on a VC panel where everyone just says, yeah, I want to agree with him. Always get an introduction. It's like, yeah, that's not helping anybody. So I think it's kind of like a long form Joe Rogan, kind of the book. You really took an effort to edit it. It's a bit like a sinking ship. Like it's like Studio 54, one in, one out of this disco. I can't let you boys in until someone leaves. That's how busy it is in there. And that's how a book should be, you know.
yeah. To your point, most people aren't spending a bunch of time editing the sum total of their tweets or even the sum total of what they would say in like a longer podcast in the same way. And so there's that old saying of, I wish I could have written a shorter, like if I had more time, I
Yeah.
would have written a shorter letter, right? It's
Right,
very
right. It's
similar from
like
a book standpoint.
Superhuman. One of my greatest investments that I always feel so good about, and love the CEO Ro Vora, who wrote the forward to my latest book. Right now in Superhuman, I could be writing you and Alex an email, and if I click on like Command J, it opens a like API to OpenAI, ChatGPT, and I could say, personalize this message, and it'll like grab everything out of your LinkedIn and all this kind of stuff and write a super customized thing. But I have to sit there watching it even do it. And so if I were really doing Superhuman AI ChatGPT on every single email, slow me down like crazy. It's so
For
true. It
sure.
takes time to write a short note.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned that you see as both incredibly important, but also a skill set that you have that many others don't, is just the importance of being able to fundraise really well. And one of the things I noticed as I was looking at website and just overall kind of your activity is that you have this LP in residence program that I actually found to be pretty interesting, and I think maybe a unique value proposition from an LP fundraising standpoint. I'd love to hear a bit about like what drove you to create that and kind of the impact that you've seen it have.
I'm so happy you tuned into that. And you probably have like, hyper frequency antenna for relationship related stuff. And that's what this is all about. So when I was researching book number two, Masters of Corporate Venture Capital, I met with every Japanese CVC, corporate venture capital group, like KDD, like basically all the large corporations from Japan have people on the ground in Silicon Valley and sometimes New York and now Austin. But what they did was they would rotate executives from Tokyo, Osaka, from the HQ to the office of where the investing business unit CVC guys are in the Valley, New York, and Austin. And after a year, or sometimes even 4 years, which is way too long, everyone said that's way too long, they send them back to the corporate. And what happens is we use the metaphor that's just directly from interviewing these guys. They said, it's like American baseball. These guys find the startup that has the innovation. If they could insert this like AI technology, it would give their corporate a huge gain in edge. And then the whole point of CVC is to access external innovation, be a beneficiary of technological change, not a victim. But the problem is, it's like baseball. They're all pitchers and no catchers. They throw the startup deck over to HQ, and everyone's just working away in their cubicle going, I'm not going to touch that. I'm not going to tarnish my Japanese career by going with DEC when I can go with IBM, which is 10 times the price and half the speed. So they should be switching to DEC, but they're not. They should be adopting the startup, but they're not. So they rotate the executive to spend like a year going to YC demo days, networking events, hanging out with you, podcasts. Let's go to Chicago and meet everybody. That they then are like brainwashed to be like a Silicon Valley mindset, injecting Jeff Bezos serum into their Japanese blood, which is very conservative. Let's not make a decision this year kind of culture. And so now when the guy has gone back, it's like Obi-Wan Kenobi, worth more dead than alive. They are able to find the startup, shoot it to that person, like Line, WeChat, WhatsApp, boom, right away. And now the guy navigates it to the HR department or the business unit that could do a trial and start using this technology and benefit. Or even over to Corp Dev, let's go buy this company. So now that company becomes like Cisco. It's just a monster. CVC, M&A, Corp Dev. It is crushing it, the most valuable company on the stock market in the world. So we basically took that mindset and said, what if we go to family offices in Chicago, in Kuala Lumpur, in Jakarta, in Sao Paulo, all over the world, and say, hey, if you invest in our VC fund, we could take your son, daughter, illegitimate kid, they all have one. It's like, what is that guy doing here? And we will basically make you an LPIR, like entrepreneur in residence EIR. This is an LPIR, and we'll basically treat you like depending on how senior you are, an associate, principal, whatever. And we will have you writing investment memos, taking 60 calls a week with startups and going to YC demo days, doing the work. And you basically get a practical MBA in venture capital, and which I would argue is completely worthless if you don't have a network of relationships that you focus on. So you literally go home with having met every VC in the Valley to New York, to Austin, to Chicago. You learned the black arts of venture capital, and now you're back like Obi-Wan Kenobi, worth more dead than alive to us. Now, when we meet a startup, you're like, hey, eventually you're going to become the matriarch, patriarch of that conglomerate in Southeast Asia that would never go public and share all this, profit that you're making. And, we can all of a sudden find some startup and push it out onto 200 million handsets because they own the telecom operator or whatever the hell it is. And so in the end, we become an incredibly effective and powerful VC fund because we have people planted like double agents all over industry and internationally. And that kid can now, we can just call the dean at any business school. They'll get right into an MBA program. That's like giving your kid a bar of gold. And whatever path they go into, making direct investments, fund-to-fund investments, tech, understanding all the difference of all the little players of AI and how it works, and don't be afraid of it and whatever. So I think it's an incredible win-win, and it's modeled after the Japanese rotation of executives to corporate venture capital funds. It's not that I'm so desperate I need to hire your idiot kid who couldn't get through trigonometry.
No,
and these are relationships for life. These are relationships for life. Like we'll be going to funerals together and and stuff for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, totally. It strikes me as an incredibly powerful way, to your point, of extending the relationship network, not just from the traditional like investor investee or LPGP or traditional relationship, well beyond that to personal relationships, as you described, go to potentially each other's weddings and funerals, but also make the power of the fund even more robust as it relates to helping your portfolio company succeed and get to the next level too. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could have a relationship with every LP that were like stuck in Istanbul airport overnight, whatever, waiting for flights being delayed or something. You really develop a relationship with these people when you're working with them. Yeah, and hopefully it's good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the way you've even spoken about kind of the universe of LPs, it's very global by definition. That maybe harkens back to the name 7BC, which I understand to be like 7 borderless continents. So given that global perspective, I'd actually love to hear how you'd characterize the difference between, I don't know, the US ecosystem and maybe the European venture ecosystem, given I know you spent some time there, and how those are evolving over time.
Yeah, so I went to high school at a collectif bilingue in Paris, and so there was 40 nationalities, half your classes in French, half in English, and every girlfriend, guy friend, they're all from different countries. And so I think for a lot of Americans, like I remember even the dean at Georgetown University, I was a scholarship working for him, and he was like, "Oh, you don't do international jobs until you're at least 10 years out of the MBA program," and I'm like, "Dude, I've been selling fiber optic cables all over Bosnia and international stuff since before I got here. What are you, nuts?" So I think we always saw, like, you meet somebody from Malaysia and you're like, yeah, I heard Kuala Lumpur is like popping city. The economy is growing like crazy. we would love to have some relationships with the families that own 30% of the GDP of that country, and extend that relationship to a startup in Chicago that we're funding. So I kind of think we had an international mindset going back to early days of high school, really. And I have to say, the books have been pretty helpful because the books end up getting translated into lots of other
Mm.
languages, like Japanese and even Russian and other languages. And so you end up getting invited to be a keynote at somebody's conference. And sometimes they pay a speaker fee, or they fly a first class or business class and put you in the Four Seasons or St. Regis, Shangri-La, whatever hotel. And I try to say, like, well, I'm invited to be in Taipei and in Hong Kong in the same time. Could you set up some meetings with family offices?
Right.
And they often can. It's often almost like government controlled kind of event anyway. So I end up, meeting these people and staying an extra day or two. And then hopefully somebody puts a few $1,000,000 in the fund, or, even a smaller check. So we end up growing that network. And, these are relationships. And the LP GP relationship, if you invest in a VC fund, we hope to pay you back quickly, probably selling some shares on secondaries when things go up, maybe some early exits, but you don't count on that these days. But it's a long relationship. Even if we pay you back, we'll still be wiring you money and giving you reports for like God knows how many years, honestly. And if they re-up in multiple vintages, that relationship goes on and on and on and on. Like, it's easier to divorce your wife than it is to get rid of your LP. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So that made it very international. And look, another confession. Sometimes if I fly to, say, Brazil, I'm like the most famous VC from Silicon Valley they've ever met. Where if I'm like running around Palo Alto to some fund of funds, they're like, boy, you ain't no Mark Andreessen JFK. Then I'm like, all right, fine. Like, looks like I'm raising more money in Brazil than I am in Palo Alto. Although we have more individual investors from Silicon Valley than any other part of the earth, just because that's where I've spent most of my career. But these are often much, much, much smaller checks than what you get out of, Singapore.
Right, right. Like I imagine just again, I'm based in Chicago, but I see maybe the risk appetite as well as the interest in being a part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Palo Alto or in Silicon Valley in general to just
Yeah.
be at a
I
different
mean,
level than other ecosystems, right? So
I,
yeah.
I mean, I think like after Harvard, you were working for the Pritzker family, and
Mhm.
like I can't get them to invest in my funds, but I'm really good friends with Steve Brotman, who's like roommates with one of the Pritzkers, and he runs
Mhm.
Alpha. So these are relationships, but trying to get them to wire money to me, they're like, dude, I'm just going to go direct. I don't need you. Whereas in Silicon Valley, especially if you work at OpenAI and you recognize, holy cow, OpenAI is not going to do everything here, and you guys could all you can automate the GMV. Like Doge should be using AI at scale in the U.S. government. You know what I mean? I don't
Mhm.
want to deal with a human. I want AI to tell me I can build that casita in my back of my house. Yes or no? Like, I don't want to deal with any human at the DMV. So I think that you have people that work for big corporate tech, fangs and stuff. They don't trust their wealth manager to be like, hey, should we buy some gold? You know, I think they're more likely to buy some Bitcoin, right? So even I'll be in Seattle from the week of December 2nd. We have a ton of LPs from Microsoft and Amazon, or that used to be, spent 18 years at Microsoft and he's now kite surfing. These kind of people make for fantastic members of an active LP base that are sourcing deals, that are joining us on Zoom calls. Because like the guy runs Copilot at Microsoft. Do you mind if he joins the call? And then the startup is like, well, I'm actually impressed because most VCs are total idiot, worthless roadkill people that are just consultants with a different compensation plan. I just had a call with 7BC and like Andrew's okay, but he doesn't know anything. Those LPs, I want access to those guys. Like that's smart money, you know? So I like having these kinds of people. I also like having doctors and people from just other industries that have domain expertise, that have a relationship graph and network in their industry, you know? So it's exciting to
Yeah.
see what can happen when you align financial interests by opening the doors to a lot of people to invest in the fund that can, even if they make one phone call during a 12-year term, that might double the returns of the entire fund.
Yeah, totally. That call might be the difference between getting into the best performing company in the world or not. So like totally can understand
Yeah.
why that's of value. Um, it's actually interesting because you describe maybe so many different pockets or universes of relationships that you are kind of maintaining, engaging with. The like, I guess my first question is, given you've had such a wide-ranging career and you've built so many of these relationships over time, I'm curious like how you think about maintaining that network, just
Yeah.
given the sheer number of people that sound like they're within it.
Yeah. Well, so the truth is, you got to get on an airplane and you got to have a calendar of events. So we we typically have private events for our LPs and our portfolio companies and our team and our scouts, and we try to get everybody into the same backyard. So, like my house in Austin, it's like every quarter we've got a barbecue. Some people are in the hot tub. Like there's a lot of people. It's all catered, and everyone's just networking. You know, and at one point we'll try to have everyone introduce yourself in under 60 seconds, kind of going back to that old Founders Club mentality, the Venture Capital Equity Exchange Fund. Like we're hosting a luncheon in Seattle for prospective LPs, not the new one, not the existing ones, on the 5th of December. So that's Seattle. And then that evening, one of our LPs has got like this castle of a house in Woodinville, which is like the Napa Valley right outside of, kind of town, where like shoplifting is legal there. So like the nice place. And everybody, that'll start at 4 o'clock, and some people will be doing karaoke at 2 a.m. So by getting people physically in a backyard together or someone's house, or even, a little restaurant, if we're in London, we'll just do like, a dinner on Portobello Road. There's this, my go-to place is this upstairs private area, and just have like drinks, network reception, followed by sit down dinner. And hardcore people will go out to, some pub or something. And so these are where relationships are, maintained and developed. And then, you say to your LPs, hey, everybody, I'm coming to Seattle. Mayron's flying up from the Valley. I'm flying up from Austin. Can we set up like a week of meetings and startups? So, everyone's kind of, hustling for that. And then other people know that we're going to be in Seattle, and they're like, you know what? If I fly from New York to Seattle, I'll probably meet all the 7B crew when I'm there, and I'll be as connected as I need to be for New York for my real estate stuff, And so people are doing other stuff with each other. So the key thing is have a steady calendar of like New York, Silicon Valley, New York, Seattle, Miami, London, Singapore, and Dubai. We do these events on a regular, so kind of every 2 months, we're doing a real event, and it's all for the insiders. And people that have never been to Singapore or never been to Dubai, you'll be connected for the rest of your life, hopefully, if you show up for this. And they all share a commonality that we're aligned in that one deal. Maybe we can go do some real estate stuff or whatever the hell they really do when they're not just being an LP.
No, that's a powerful strategy of just trying to be a consistent community builder and throwing events and giving people an opportunity to build relationships in person. Sounds like you spend a lot of time on planes, which I'm unsurprised by.
Yeah, in fact, in the planes is actually the explanation of the books, because like I like to write when I'm on an airplane. You know what I mean? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we'll be landing in San Francisco soon. I'm like, no, I love this flight from Doha. It's like I'm loving it in my little seat. So yeah, yeah. But the other thing is when I get in my car, I'm always like, who am I going to call? Who am I going to call? And I often have like, if I know I'm driving to a meeting somewhere, I often have that scheduled to call somebody. So I do a lot of, whenever I'm in the car, I call somebody.
Got it. So one of those never a wasted minute sort of workflows.
Yeah, it makes the time fly. You're like, a little traffic. Well, maybe I'm going to change my meeting and go right back to your office. This is like a nightmare, what you're telling me.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. So I imagine you probably have a ton of these because of the way your kind of relationship network operates and how much you put relationships at the center of everything. But I'm curious, if you had to pick like a single biggest win or opportunity that's come your way as an investor that you can trace back to your network or your relationships, what would you pick?
Well, every single investment has a documented trail of how we met this person. And a lot of it is they just emailed us. So, one of the reasons I invested in Superhuman was to deal with the email avalanche that we have all the time. And, you get on a podcast with a big audience, you could get thousands of emails as a result, and they tell their friend. I kind of like the story of Nick Kundera was the founder of Partender, and it was a brother sister relationship, which you don't expect that to work, but it worked pretty nicely. And then Raul Vora had created Reportive, and I was a Reportive user, and then I didn't know Raul, and I had heard that LinkedIn bought it for like 15 million, and he had four other co-founders. So there was a team of five, and he had a vision to kind of build Superhuman. They wanted to sell and take the money. I actually think it's not a bad thing when you're pretty young. Raise some venture, make a win, make money for everybody, make a couple $1,000,000 yourself because the liquidation stack is low. Like you don't have too much money to be paid back. Everybody likes you, and you kind of know what it's like to actually sell your company to LinkedIn. I've never sold my company to LinkedIn. Ask Raul who to talk to. So and then so he was oversubscribed for his pre-seed round for Superhuman. So he really didn't like Charles River Ventures, CRV was in it. He had a lot of kind of celebrity people. I think Jason Calacanis was in his first one. There was no shortage of a seed round that he was raising at an 8 million priced round pre at the time. Shows there's been a bit of inflation here. And he can't, I moved to Austin during COVID, so I was still living in Silicon Valley. I was in our San Francisco office. I remember it really vividly. He came in and I was already like, Nick had practically closed me on investing in Raul. And I lived in London for 10 years and Raul is from the UK. So we just bonded immediately. And I love the vision of you could toggle back and forth. So it was not like a forklift change that's like too much change to how you're going to fix email. And it was the relationship with Nick. Like we had an associate that would even look after Nick and Angeli's dog when they were traveling. So like that was kind of like your portfolio founders are becoming family members kind of relationship. And I'm sure, if he didn't talk a really good game about me and our firm, we probably wouldn't have gotten into what was like oversubscribed the minute he snapped his fingers funding round. And that relationship's been great. And there was, quite a, I don't know if it was for years, but I was actually like doing the most email of anyone on Superhuman.
Ish.
And I was doing my best to drive functional requirements, like I've always wanted him to do CRM, but we'll see how long it goes, but he might one day. So I feel like I've had an impact on that too. And that's been a great relationship. And, I was happy to have him write the forward to my book number 4 and feature him and get more people to improve their lives by being on Superhuman.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great win, both from a financial standpoint, but it also sounds like well beyond that. Like the relationship itself also sounds like a win in so many ways too. And so that's definitely an incredible example.
I mean, there's parts of my job I don't love, but this feels good. Like there were times like when I was brokering secondaries after the Founders Club, like I was helping a founder get the biggest like basis point higher for selling his Pandora shares or his, helping Daniel X sell Spotify shares. I was like, I don't feel really fulfilled in just doing this. I just don't feel really fulfilled. I think that if I could have 25 superhumans per fund every 2 or 3 years, oh boy, I would just feel like the Buddha.
Right. Probably on both fronts, both on the relationship like fund front, but then also naturally like on the returns front too. It'd be incredible to have 25 of those per fund.
It's great. It's great to, invest in something at 8 million and then, a couple more times and watch it exit for billions and billions. But it's not so much about the money. If you really just wanted money, you'd be, buying Walgreens and merging it with, Boots, over at KKR. You totally get a fund to like, General Catalyst is at like their latest fund's like 3.8. NEA's raised 3.8. Half of that is to buy the LPs out from their previous fund that was never exiting. The management fees on, they're making over 600 million on the management fee, and they have one of those every 2 years. And if they get to 1.2x, which doesn't justify the lack of liquidity, they're laughing at us with our 5 to 7.5x cash on cash. Like they're like, have fun in your little sandbox with your toys.
Yeah, totally. The fee revenue at the very large scale fund is just a very different game. And to your point, There are many other ways and probably many easier ways to make money. And so as a
That's what I'm
result,
trying to say. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's nice to feel good about, relationships and how it's going.
No, absolutely. One of the key practices, it sounds like, from your relationship building standpoint is events, and it sounds like you have an incredible calendar there. I'm curious if there are any other relationship building practices or tactics that you either think are undervalued or that you use heavily to maybe accomplish what sounds like an incredible array of relationships in so many ways.
Yeah, so I think a very like actionable thing anyone tuning into this episode can do themselves is to try to adopt a policy that you're going to spend 30% of your day, of your work day, doing favors for other people, asking for nothing in return. So, like if you guys ask me to post the link to this episode on Spotify, whatever, on YouTube to my LinkedIn, I will absolutely do that. Even if it's only to help you and nothing for me and asking for nothing in return. If I'm just like doing so many favors for Ablorde up in Chicago, then the day that I say I'm coming to Chicago, you're probably going to be like, I don't really like Andrew, but for God's sakes, he's done me so many favors. It's beyond rude not to try to be helpful to him when he comes. So if you just shower somebody with so many favors and you're just Mr. Mrs. Action, like don't be like, oh, back and forth 50 times. Like, you want to meet lawyers when you go to London? You got it. Boom, 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 boom. 20 intros. How many intros before you want me to stop doing this? Because I'll just do it for you. And then you're like, shit, I haven't done anyone a favor all day long. And then someone sends you a WhatsApp and you're like, boom, this will be my moment to help the universe and deposit into that ATM so I can eventually withdraw from it. And so if you think about it mathematically, if you go from spending 100% of your time trying to achieve your own business objectives down to 70%, you think, well, I'm losing 30% of my productivity or my results I should be getting. But when you've just turned Ablorde into your like brother and your friend, who's like the king of Chicago or something, all of a sudden, you might with just one email or one visit, one drive-by, achieve 2x on all of your 70%. So now your 70% of your time where you are working for your own book is achieving a 1.4x multiple when you were selfishly giving everyone the finger and just trying to do your own crap, right? So it's just like math. And if you're any good at it, if you're actually good at this, mathematically, even if you're a crazy introvert that loves animals and hates humans, you should, maybe consider doing somebody a favor every now and then, because you might, if you're good at it, be a 5xer, So you might be like, 30x, who knows? And people helping people is how, things get done. So I think that's an actionable thing. Another actionable thing, and I talk about this kind of crap in my book, is when you go to a networking event, there's a tendency, especially in our world, VC startups, and corps and everybody that's in the technology ecosystem. You go to the networking event, you're like, I'm here to raise money for my Series B. And then you meet someone and they're like, I'm a biotech founder myself. And they're like, wrong person, get out of my way. There's a tendency to say, I'm here to meet Series B investors that want to invest in my stage, sector, geography, whatever. And you meet somebody and they're not it. Well, they're not it. There's people right behind you that might be the person you're looking for. So you don't want to sink too much time because, you got a family and kids. You got to get out of here in an hour or whatever, or maybe even 20 minutes from now. So you don't want to get cornered by the headhunter telling you he's taking the executive search to an all new level. But you can say to them, so okay, biotech, I get it. What are you looking for? Like why are you here? And then be like, all right, look, here's my info. Let me see if I can if I find anybody for you, I'll come back to you. And so you've actually successfully shut him up or shut her up and you've moved on. And then if you meet someone, they're like, yeah, I just raised a $2 billion biotech fund. We do drug discovery. We love losing money. Be like, okay, great. Stand here and just walk them right over and be like, biotech, go off and make love. And then so take this stance of I'm gonna actually listen, because what happens is you're looking the person in the eyes and you're literally saying, what do you want? What do you do? How can I help you? As opposed to, hey, I already figured out that like I don't do clean tech from Romania. Just get out of my face. That's the actual, like, you were sending frequency subliminal messages to the guy. I hate biotech people, clean tech people from Romania, and he's not loving it. Whereas if you like pay attention, he'll be like, that guy was like smarter than Peter Thiel. Like he was paying attention.
Yeah, no, that all strikes me as incredibly powerful. If I were kind of summarizing it, it sounds like one is trying to figure out ways to help people, and so actually budgeting time out of your calendar to help them with no expectation of return. And even if you don't have that expectation, like mathematically, it's going to work out in your favor. And then second is when you're at events, don't just be a heat-seeking missile for the thing that you came there to try to accomplish, but actually spend time engaging with someone, even for a moment, to understand what it is that they need. Because if you can help them, you're putting, again, good karma into the universe.
And maybe try to keep a 30-second clock timer on those
Mhm.
conversations and, make a statement of how I'm going to help you as a way of spinning on your heel and moving on to finding what you came there for. Um, and be good at CRM. I mean, database discipline
Yeah,
is important when you are networking at scale for, 3 decades or 4 decades or 5 decades. So a little
completely.
tech helps with cognitive decline.
Yep, I
I'll
completely
tell you
agree, although I'm biased.
I actually can't wait for like saying, here are my 30,000 contacts on LinkedIn. Um, Send out AI emails of how can I help you? And then have the AI figure out how to help them and they start doing the favors while I go skiing.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the next 5 years, you might truly have like that sort of autonomous movement happening with software. I'm pretty excited for it myself. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun and interesting decade as all of these practices merge with the sorts of things that LLMs are making possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll maybe close here with our traditional closing question on the relationship edge, which is you've shared actually so many lessons around relationship building, around kind of the world of private markets and everything else that we've discussed. What do you think is the single biggest lesson you've learned about relationship management that you think most people get wrong?
Yeah. I mean, flipping from like your kind of happy kumbaya Jesus stuff to maybe something more aggressive. Sometimes people don't understand that this is like a one-way street relationship and they keep pouring into someone and they're getting
Mm,
taken advantage of even. And at some point, if I'm saying, hey, I would like you to help me find publishers in other languages with like big publishers, other countries, can you help me with that? And they're like, oh, I can totally help you with that. I used to work at foreign book rights at McGraw Hill. I used to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair. I know everybody. Like, all right, awesome. And then the guy's like, but can you help me with this and that and this and that? And with one of our associates in San Francisco, I'm like, dude, this woman is completely taking advantage of you. It's time to put her on notice. Like this person is just bad. Like they banned YouTube and we're not banning TikTok. How is that fair? That's not a two-way street. So, we got to get, you got to get this onto a two-way street. There's something about, you've deposited into the universe some good vibes that will somehow come back at you, but this person is a black hole, you know? So I don't know. When you asked the question, I didn't have an immediate positive triggered store procedure to come out. Like if you ask me anything about venture, I probably have one. But you know, sometimes you gotta kind of watch the numbers, dollars in, dollars out, and have some accounting, on a relationship. And maybe you can, I kind of like to be hard on the problem, soft on the person. And so when you're doing something like that, you can like increase your fuzzy warmness. I'm like, hey, sister, I love you. I really, really do, and I love everything you're doing. But I was talking to my boss, and he was kind of saying like, I introduced you to Henrik Fisker, and that made you $4 million, and like, you haven't done anything for us, and we've been asking you for like these publishing contacts, and you're not. Why are you not doing anything for us? Like, do you hate us? I mean, what's going on here? I don't know. That's maybe a mistake. Is you know, keep your eye on the numbers of how our relationship is going, maybe.
yeah,
And we only have so many hours awake before we die, and we're not vampires that'll live forever. So keep a little track of, a little peer review of how it's going.
It makes complete sense to me that you have to be careful of takers in any scenario where you're trying to spread positive vibes, good karma, because some folks will only receive and never give. I can totally
But
understand it.
I intentionally put myself out there and recommend to everybody, put yourself out and let yourself get taken advantage of every day, and let the takers take, and but measure, and then eventually you turn off the faucet to that to what is now come down to be a pure taker. And there's some very misleading people, you know. So,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, you have to be careful. You have to watch for your own well-being, even though, to your point, it's worth being someone who's willing to be taken advantage of in favor of trying to do good for other people.
I mean, part of the relationship development is to be able to do kind of like MBA negotiations 101. You want to understand what they really want and be like, oh, so I'm just trying to increase my percentage of the widget sales. That's all I want. But I can introduce them to people in Europe, and I can put that card on the table and then start threatening to take that card away or give it to them. With relationship development, you got to figure out what are the cards that we can even put on the table. What can we do? What can we give them that they even want, that doesn't even cost us anything or take away from my primary objective, which is more higher percentage of the widget sales? You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
it's good to explore those things and build that relationship. So at least you have the information, to audit. If you're able to audit, like, wow, we're giving them everything and they give us nothing. Like, this lawyer had 18 items and didn't budge on one and got me to budge on half of them. This is bad.
Right.
Maybe a little
Is clearly,
accounting, a
yeah,
little
to your
sober
point, it's clearly
accounting for
not a
time.
two. Yeah, it's clearly not a two-way street. To your point.
Yeah, but give it time. Let them take advantage of you for a little while, or for a good while, and then say, I've now hit the point.
Yeah, yeah, completely get it. Andrew, this has been an incredible conversation. I think our audience will really enjoy it. I certainly have. For those who want to learn more about you, find your books, like hear other content that you've been a part of, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe you can put a link or two in the show notes.
Mhm.
If you search Andrew Romans on Amazon, in any country, my books come up. My email, I'm happy to hear from entrepreneurs, LPs, corporates, everybody in the ecosystem. My email is andrew at 7bc.vc. So that's Andrew at number 7bc.vc. Yeah, and you can just Google my name, and the books come up. Masters of Raising Venture Capital is the new book, and it does talk about networking and stuff. And then Masters of Corporate Venture Capital, is another one. And the Entrepreneurial Bible to Venture Capital is the first one. Masters of Blockchain and Crypto is book 3.
Fantastic. Well, audience, definitely go check those out. Andrew, thank you again for the time and looking forward to maintaining the relationship.
Okay, yeah, likewise. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Bye for now.
Thanks.